Hi guys, and welcome to another classic Tamiya kit build video. Now this kit has been released in a few forms, including a version with the 25-pounder field gun, but the version that I'm building is just the quad on its own. You can always tell an old Tamiya kit by the instructions, especially these photos that tend to appear in the margins of the very old kit. The gun tractor itself isn't a complicated build. It comes in two main pieces to start with. And you can see here on the inside of the upper piece, the date of the kit is 1974. Despite being such an old kit, it goes together really well and there are no problems with fit. A bit like the Krupp truck which I built recently, there's quite a lot of detail on the underside with various pipes and axles and so on, even though most of this can't be seen. And again, there are quite a few parts that make up the engine, which will be covered up. You can't even see it through any of the grills. If you wanted to show the engine, you would have to make some modifications to the bonnet or the hood. And that's the completed chassis, and that's probably the majority of the parts in the kit as well. There isn't a huge amount of detail on the interior, but then I imagine these vehicles are quite sparse inside anyway, and I am going to add a few items like some weapons and some ammo boxes and some stowage inside, just to make it look a bit more lived in. The seats fit nicely into the floor, but I left those separate for easier painting and weathering later on. And you can start to see that classic angular shape of the front of the quad taking form now. And this is the fully built kit ready for painting. The pin marks on the inside of these doors were probably the only real cleanup that I had to do in the kit. The instructions and the box art show desert schemes for this vehicle, but I wanted something a bit different. I quite like the green and black Mickey Mouse camo pattern which was used in Europe. So with that in mind, I put down a base colour of a dark olive green. And for the purpose of painting, I kept the chassis, the floor and the upper part of the vehicle separate. In order to mask for the Mickey Mouse ears, I used some scraps of leftover Tamiya masking paper and my circular cutting tool. As I made the circles here, I made sure to adjust the radius of the tool from time to time. And here you can see the kit ready with all the masking on. And after an application of black. Next I painted the details and I added some dry brushing on the non-slip contact areas at the side of the vehicle. For some reason the paint took on a little bit of a texture here, I'm not quite sure why, but I managed to smooth that out with some very high grit sandpaper. The seats were painted khaki and then given a dry brush with XF52 flat earth. And at this point, which is probably a little bit late in the process, I started looking at some reference photos like this and I realised that a lot of these quads had field-made racks for storage on the back. So I took some pieces of brass rod and cut them to length and basically arranged them as a makeshift storage rack, and I glued these together using some CA glue. I think that holds quite well. Some jerry cans, an oil drum and so on. I think that's a nice little addition. I also added a foil strap on the inside of the door, and this map came from another kit, but equally you could just use a map that was printed out from an image on the internet. I also decided to make a tarpaulin, and I used a new technique for this. I can't remember where I got this idea, but basically I took some PVA glue and I mixed it with a little bit of Vallejo colour. And then once those two were fully mixed, I got a sheet of clean glass, or perspex, and I spread the mixture onto the glass, trying to get it to be as thin as possible, trying to get it to be fairly even. It does self-level. And trying to make sure there were no bubbles in it as well. And then once that was done, I left it for 24 hours to dry. And then the next day, using a very sharp knife just to lift the edge, it's possible to peel this back. And after a while, it gives you a very nice scale tarpaulin. And of course you can cut this to size and square off the edges and so on. This has a very glossy finish, as you can see, but it will take paint very well, so you can just airbrush some paint over the top of it. The only reason I put the paint in the first place is because PVA glue dries clear, and the paint helps you see the tarpaulin as you're making it. And as you can see here, it folds very nicely over the contours in the model. To start the weathering, I used a burnt umber oil wash. Initially I added this to the raised detail on the wheels, and then I decided to spread it all over the model to get some nice streaking effects. And you can just see those there when the light catches them. For mud effects, I use this enamel wet mud product from MIG, and I stippled this all over the underside of the vehicle. The aim here was to achieve some nice texture. After that had dried, I wasn't 100% happy with it, so I used some of this dry ground texture from AK Interactive. I know it's a completely different colour, but it would be covered over with pigments later anyway. I applied this in a slightly lighter layer than the previous wet mud effect. And for some reason I seem to have lost the footage of what I did next, but basically I took the dark brown pigment here and I put it over the top of the texture which I applied, and then I added small amounts of the lighter pigment. The figure in the kit is in desert uniform, including shorts, and so this isn't really suitable for Western Europe, so I'm going to get rid of him. I've got a future use for him on another kit, and I turned to the mini art set of British tankers in winter uniform. I know these are tankers, but I'm going to steal one of them for use in this kit, probably this guy here in the middle. For the terrain I decided to use this small wooden base. And you can see there I put an RAF round door on the top as well for air recognition. And instead of making the terrain myself, I decided to use a piece of this grass mat from Dio Bros. I think this must be a brand that's only really available in Southeast Asia, and even then not very widely, because I've barely seen it advertised online. There's a very minimal online presence. I did do a review of this about a year ago, which I'll link to in the top right corner. but you can see it's got a good amount of detail in this mat, nice texture, nice range of colours, perfect for Western European terrain. And so I stuck that mat down onto the wood with some regular PVA glue. Unfortunately, the edges didn't go down as well as they could have done. I should have perhaps clamped those a little bit more. But with the grass added, that was the model and the diorama complete. So I painted up the figure, and then for a bit more interest I added, shall we say, some lunch. And here is the final result. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. It's been a while since I've uploaded a video. I do have 4 or 5 kits which I have built and painted, but I haven't got around to editing the videos yet. But somewhere in that list of future videos is the McLaren MP430, the Avro Vulcan from Trumpeter, the Elephant, the Matilda in the Desert Scheme, the Tamiya Tilly, and a few other bits and pieces. So hopefully there will be a video next week, and until then, thank you very much for watching, and if you haven't subscribed yet, then please consider doing so.